The Left Betrays Itself, Part 2. One of the things I loved about liberals, progressives, and other leftists when I was younger was the fact that they actually believed in free speech. They and I may never agree, me being an antediluvian conservative Republican, but there was a willingness to trust that an open dialogue would produce an interesting conversation. And even if we wouldn't agree, we would at least have some fun together in our disagreement. The disagreements could be playful, they could be passionate, and they were mutually respectful while still being funny. We could use humor, sarcasm, snarkiness, all as part of an experience, an encounter, something that was valuable. If you believe in tolerance, you have to believe in dealing with people who aren't necessarily like you, who don't necessarily think like you. The real diversity is a diversity of ideas. The left, when I was younger, understood this. Perhaps because they still felt that they were the counterculture. And as counterculture, it was their duty to challenge the dominant culture and point out its unreflected upon assumptions, which is prejudice, the prejudgment of things without due consideration. So back in the Stone Age, when dinosaurs ruled the world and I was young, most of the people I knew who were passionate, liberals, progressives, and even socialists, were willing to and eager to debate ideas in a substantive fashion with someone like me. What happened? How did we get to a point where the left is dominating media and stifling other points of view, where the notion that there are two or more points of view is considered to be obscene in certain newsrooms and certain editorial boards, New York Times, where the idea that giving a point of view airtime or print is equivalent to advocating it. And therefore, to project your virtue to the world, you must suppress it. This idea has even taken hold in social media. Not that YouTube would have anything to do with that. China Uncensored. I liked it when liberals believed that we were free to choose our cultural identity, which was the topic of my previous video. And I enjoyed discussing the nature of life, the universe, and everything with my liberal friends, and they were friends, because it was fun, and because sometimes we learned things from one another. I never intended to make them conservative. They never intended to make me liberal. That was unlikely to the point of ridiculousness, but I respected them as people who had the intellectual honesty to understand that their points of view were points of view, and not revealed truth like Moses with the tablets and the horns of God behind him down from the mountaintop. But today, what was counterculture is now culture, and the left has gotten lazy, intellectually lazy. They suppress rather than encourage debate. They insist on an orthodoxy, a conformity with their orthodoxy. And if not, you are going to be punished. The Antifa thugs will threaten you physically. The people on campus, the college professor will threaten you with a failing grade. The mobs on campus will threaten you with social ostracism. And you know something? Unfortunately, most free Americans of college age aren't up to be crusaders. Not real crusaders. Not crusaders against the dogma of their institution and the majority of their classmates. That kind of crusading spirit requires something inside, a fire inside, a dedication to the notion of open debate, and an appreciation, an independently derived appreciation of truth. And a lot of people ages 18 to 23 simply have not developed that. So they go along. And they go along to get along. And they get their grades. And they are habituated to an environment that is absolutely intellectually intolerant of conservative, libertarian, or mainstream traditional American notions. Instead, they become used to having to hide, or having to masquerade, or worse, they allow themselves to become overwhelmed and persuaded that their lives would be so much better if only they became a true believer like everyone expects them to. If you can't discuss your ideas openly, if you can't debate those ideas passionately, if you aren't willing to entertain the real possibility that your most devoutly held belief is simply one opinion among many valid opinions, and that people of goodwill and high intellect might actually think that, from your point of view, wrong is right and black is white, if you really believe that it's such a fragile thing, your belief, that it can't withstand opposition, you're no longer a person of goodwill. You've either allowed yourself to be enslaved, or you've allowed yourself to join a cult. I don't want to believe that we have a couple of generations of slaves and cultists. But that is what our university system and many of our high schools and other K through 12 institutions have been trying to produce. People who will not question the orthodoxy, the dogmatic insistence that man-made climate change is an existential threat and the only answer is some form of global socialism where an international body regulates freedom, because freedom is the problem to these people, not the solution. Where there are countless genders, and where gender as opposed to sex is a cultural characteristic that we should allow freedom of choice about. I have no problem with a person deciding that their sexuality is unusual or realizing that it is or whatever. But don't force me to say that 2 plus 2 equals 3 or 2 plus 2 equals 5 or I'm a homophobe. Bullshit. You were once in the minority. You were once counterculture. And you advocated for the free expression of your inner self and for the free expression of your true face without limit. And now that you are aligned with the powerful within every major educational institution, with a few exceptions, and the media and the popular culture, it is nothing short of rank hypocrisy for you to insist that people say your dogma when you know and they know that they don't believe it, in order to express your now newfound power. It's a power trip. It's a power trip to be able to call anyone who disagrees with you a racist. It's a power trip to try to get them fired, to try to get them expelled, to try to get them shunned. The left has become the Inquisition. The left has made McCarthy, I'm talking about Tail Gunner Joe, Senator McCarthy, of the witch hunts. You've made him look like a rank amateur. Your blacklists dwarf any blacklists that anti-communists had in the 1940s or 50s. The fact that you are willing to do violence to people who disagree with you show that you are cowards. Because if you weren't cowards, if you weren't afraid of the essential weakness of your point of view, you would not be afraid to meet people equally, hear their side, and debate it, and discuss it, and consider it, like an intellectual, like a human being, like a person of goodwill. The left has betrayed itself. What once was the primary group advocating for free speech and free thought and free expression, now that they've been given a taste of power, have become as repressive as Joe McCarthy and as violent as the Ku Klux Klan. No, this must stop. I loved the left when it was honest, when it was brave enough to engage in the battlefield of ideas, to go into the arena without a secret edge and just talk. I miss that. And if I were a leftist, I'd miss it too. Because what exists today is a flabby, vicious form of power game that betrays the true spirit of the value of ideas of reform and ideas of making a better person and a better world. You cannot do that through compulsion, and you cannot do that through violence. I learned that from liberals. I hope liberals learn it again.